Hi, everyone. Thanks for clicking in and listening to the Sustainable Cannabis Coalition podcast. Our podcast are a series of roundtable discussions with industry luminaries, tackling trends and sustainable practices within the fast-growing cannabis industry. I'm your host, Dana Hillman, VP of Business Development for GrowIQ. For this episode, we'll be talking sustainability in the context of the cannabis industry with none other than one of our guests and founding members of the SCC, Valiant-America. Valiant's one of the premier contractors and builders in the cannabis space, and we're really lucky to have Eamon O'Kane, their CEO, and Chris Tenaglia, their COO, with us today. So, gentlemen, thanks for taking the time out of your busy pandemic to discuss sustainability in relationship to construction, design, build for commercial cannabis facilities. You guys know this like the back of your hand, so there's a lot of information to get to, and really excited about that. But as always, I'd love for you guys to quickly share your backgrounds to give our listeners a bit of context. So if we can go around the horn, starting with Eamon and Chris, that'll be great, and I'll shut up now.
Thanks for having us on. So my name is Eamon O'Kane. I'm the CEO of Valiant. The background with the company, we go back about 12 years in relation to cannabis. Whenever I first emigrated to America back in 2008, you guys were talking about legalizing cannabis down in Colorado and California. And first thought into my head at that point was, my God, somebody has to build these things.
Yeah.
So I got my ass basically down to Colorado to try and learn as much as I could at that point in time, whenever the legalization started to happen on the West Coast. I kind of followed the train there for a while, up the West Coast, up into Washington State, learning as we go along. I actually started my first building company back in 2010. Mm-hmm. Which was actually paper development, and it then morphed into a few years later into Valiant with my two partners, Niall McManus and Christopher Tenaglia. So you probably noticed I just mangled up Christopher's name because I just can't get it right with my accent. So that's just the very short version of how we get into it. And basically every step of the way, because cannabis is such a fast-moving industry, the technology is changing year after year after year, and everybody's looking towards sustainable. So it was an easy fit for us just to keep following the trend that we do. And Chris is he's definitely the expert. He keeps on his finger on the pulse and keeps all the guys up to date with all the new developments. So,
yeah, and Chris, if you don't mind, so thanks, Eamon, and Chris, a little bit about you too.
So I started my career off of in the finance industry. I've worked about 8 years in finance, and then after the depression in 2008, there was a bunch of real estate developments, and when the broker section, there was a lot of fee compression, so there was a lot less chance to make money. So I met Eamon and Niall about 5 years ago. In about 4 years, we started working together, and then they asked me to be a member of the team, and I liked working with them. They take a totally different approach to the cannabis industry. They look at, I haven't seen a general contractor, consultant, and a just general consulting in any type of space that actually puts the client first rather than themselves. So I like that aspect of it, from coming from a very selfish industry in the brokerage world down to going to the general contracting side of it and seeing that there was multiple avenues. Eamon and Niall don't have any reservations of any new ideas or any type of any type of business to go into. Everything's a good idea until it's not. So we all kind of have the same type of business practice, and I haven't seen anybody else be able to actually execute that the proper way. So they asked me to be a partner about 4 years ago, and here we are today.
Well, it's funny, that leads me into the big looming question there, right? So in traditional design build for, say, residential commercial projects, From a sustainability perspective, there's a fairly mature body of information out there and resources, but that's really not the case for the cannabis space. So if you guys wouldn't mind taking us through the process of building one of your sustainable cultivation facilities that not only serves its intended use, but one that can stand the test of time, that would be great. So whoever wants to handle that hot potato.
Well, I'll start and then I'll hand off to Chris. So that whole process starts with the team that you put together. Now we're talking pre-construction, we're talking architects, engineers. They have to be open-minded to the products that are out there, because unfortunately there's engineers and architects out there that they just stick with the same old traditional equipment. They don't look out for the best interests of the client. And unfortunately, the industry's fraught with backhanders and stuff like that. So we try to we build our team from a point of view of working together from the very start. So whenever you do get our team, we pick out the best architect and engineer in the area that we can work with, that have a progressive mindset to open, because a lot of people that we talk to don't even understand the equipment that we're talking about, because it's so new to them, especially new clients that are building their first facility. Whenever you take in your average unit for air handling, it actually freaks them out, the actual size of it, and then you need multiple of these in the building. So there's lots of new products out there that are energy efficient, and that's what we go looking for. We have our own catalog now of energy efficient equipment that we like to use, that gets updated. Chris, would you say every 6 months?
Yeah, getting faster than that now with the new products, probably about 3.
Yeah, so about every 3 months we're updating that product book, because there's just so much stuff coming out. There's so many companies driven for sustainability now, reusable products, all that kind of stuff. So it covers everything from the materials that we actually use to build right through to even the packaging material we recommend to new clients. But as for the building part of it, yeah, there's so much equipment out there now. There's so much on the market, and we need a progressive mind to work with us to go forward to create that whole sustainability efficiency for the client.
Well, it's funny, that leads me into the big looming question there, right? So in traditional design build for, say, residential commercial projects, from a sustainability perspective, there's a fairly mature body of information out there and resources, but that's really not the case for the cannabis space. So if you guys wouldn't mind taking us through the process of building one of your sustainable cultivation facilities that not only serves its intended use, but one that can stand the test of time, that would be great. So whoever wants to handle that hot potato.
Well, I'll start and then I'll hand off to Chris. So that whole process starts with the team that you put together. Now we're talking pre-construction, we're talking architects, engineers. They have to be open-minded to the products that are out there, because unfortunately there's engineers and architects out there that they just stick with the same old traditional equipment. They don't look out for the best interests of the client. And unfortunately, the industry's fraught with backhanders and stuff like that. So we try to we build our team from a point of view of working together from the very start. So whenever you do get our team, we pick out the best architect and engineer in the area that we can work with, that have a progressive mindset to open, because a lot of people that we talk to don't even understand the equipment that we're talking about, because it's so new to them, especially new clients that are building their first facility. Whenever you take in your average unit for air handling, it actually freaks them out, the actual size of it, and then you need multiple of these in the building. So there's lots of new products out there that are energy efficient, and that's what we go looking for. We have our own catalog now of energy efficient equipment that we like to use, that gets updated. Chris, would you say every 6 months?
Yeah, getting faster than that now with the new products, probably about 3.
Yeah, so about every 3 months we're updating that product book because there's just so much stuff coming out. There's so many companies driven for sustainability now, reusable products, all that kind of stuff. So it covers everything from the materials that we actually use to build right through to even the packaging material we recommend to new clients. But as for the building part of it, yeah, there's so much equipment out there now. There's so much on the market. And we need a progressive mind to work with us to go forward to create that whole sustainability efficiency for the client. So I'll hand that off to Chris because I just confused myself.
Made perfect sense to me, but yeah, Chris, go ahead, man.
So just building off what Eamon said is everything starts with the building envelope. You have to, anybody that's going to be starting a cannabis facility or just looking at, something that can stand the test of time, like you've mentioned, you need to find a building or even a piece of land that you can put a new building on or be able to back your equipment into it. You have to design the facility to fit into that space. A lot of people have their design in their head and then try to retrofit it. There's a lot of things that are very important, especially building in the state of Massachusetts, where it's one of the most harsh environments. You have 120 degrees of fluctuation between any given season, and humidity that's insane. So you have to be able to choose your right materials, and again, it starts with the building envelope. A lot of people pick an old mill building because it's very cheap to purchase, but they end up spending just as much it would be to build a new building when they finally seal that building up to make it to the standards that you need to build and grow cannabis inside. A lot of, like, we like to joke around that we've tested every single mold resistant product in the entire market, and the book that we have for how many different products we'd actually recommend to use that actually do what they say and will be mold resistant, will last time, will be washable multiple times, be able to resist chemicals, is about as thick as your cell phone, and the materials that we say not to use is about as thick as a dictionary. So there's a lot of experience that we bring to the table, and a lot of trial and error that we can use that to help other people with their new facility. A lot of things that people don't take also into consideration is the roof. People say that the roof will last you 25 years, but you get one leak inside a facility, that water, I'm sure you've heard it before just on HDTV and other places that people watch, water will find its way. So if there's a small leak in a roof, it can go down the sides of the walls. It can go into your cannabis facility, go into your HVAC system. Little bits of water here and there will create mold, and that mold spores will just grow like wildfire. And it's very difficult to remediate that. So the more that you can prevent that to happen from the very beginning, the better.
So Chris and Eamon, I'm really curious. Being in the industry myself, I've seen a lot of licensees approach a build from a lease cost perspective. Well, and that's probably nothing new, but one of the things that's really interesting is that BlackRock, sent out a letter to all their CEOs of the companies in which they're invested, saying that they've got to have a sustainability plan, otherwise the spigot will get cut off. Are you starting to see the mindset trickle down to the cannabis space where producers are looking, beyond just upfront cost to cost over time and then sustainability as a whole?
We are actually, but it's at a very slow pace right now, unfortunately. There's maybe, I would estimate, around 10 to 15% of our clients are actually asking those questions. But the vast majority are definitely still like, get this built as cheap as humanly possible so we can start growing as fast as possible. But the mindset, like this 5 years ago, that mindset wasn't there. At least, we can actually see the trend actually starting to come into this, especially the conversations we're having with people in California that are now at the stage of retrofitting are actually looking at it from the sustainable angle, which is very welcoming. But as I say, they've been in operation for over 10 years. They have built up some money, so they can do it this way now.
Yeah, Dana, there's it's not so much the client's fault sometimes. It's a long process to get into the cannabis industry. You have to pick your building, go through a community host agreement, get your special permit, get your funding, your architects, engineers. It could be a year, sometimes 2 years by the time you actually get building. So they just want to get it in as cheap as possible and as fast as possible. But it's difficult when you've been waiting that long and you're so close to the finish line to not rush the process. And like Eamon said, we try to tell the client that this, yes, you might get 1 or 2 harvests out of this and be fine, but the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, you can have issues upon issues upon issues and then have to retrofit the whole thing. And we've been seeing more and more people, because the stories are coming out more, the industry, as big as it is, it's getting smaller. People are talking to each other and understanding that that's actually a thing.
Absolutely, that is a thing. Eamon and Chris, you guys are unique, and what I mean by that is you've been in the business for a while, and indoor ag for cannabis is certainly unique as well. And as Eamon said, you guys have worked through some things that didn't work in the past. You've also compiled a pretty large body of knowledge that you're able to draw from. So when a licensee is going through the process of getting a facility built, what's the most important aspect they should be qualifying in a builder to understand their expertise in cannabis and their ability to construct a more sustainable facility?
Well, that would be experience for sure. As I said, I went back to the earlier heading was the team. The team has to be correct to make it an efficient process to build this, and be open-minded to what maybe we have to put in, because we have worked with engineers and architects that will not listen to a single word we'll say. If we're value engineering or we're looking at it from sustainability angle, it's kind of like you're just builders. What he's talking about, but we have the experience, and like it's funny because we have partnerships all over America, right? And we've taught them our way of doing things, and our guys in California, Matt Machado, he's actually starting to see the full circle coming, where they're down there, they're starting to ask him, no, I want to do it the sustainable way. So, for the years of going back and forward with all the architects and engineers trying to fight this thing through for sustainability, it's actually starting to happen down in California, where people are actually saying, yeah, we want to do it this way. So we see that as a positive, but also we know it's going to be a slow progress coming into the East Coast.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd like to get your take. I see that within the cannabis space, maybe there's possibly a stronger social awareness around sustainability, at least within the customer base. So do you sense that producers are feeling that pressure as well?
Sustainably made products, for sure. I mean, not so much the sustainably made products, because the products that need to be put into a cannabis facility they're mostly made out of artificial materials, but it's the energy that goes onto the facility, using like a cogen system to be able to produce its own electricity off of natural gas, solar. People are trying to find different places they can pull energy off of a wind turbine. We see the sustainability from that aspect coming into the facility more so than using the sustainable products. Again, mainly because the products are mostly plastic, wipeable surfaces, and chemical.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult to put that practice into the cannabis facility.
That leads me to a quick pivot. So you have such a broad knowledge of the equipment that goes into a cannabis facility, and in many cases, the choice of equipment impacts everything. So maybe you can give us an idea of how those choices broadly impact sustainability and your process in all of this.
So one of the biggest things that you can do for sustainability and being able to, for your equipment process, would be your BMS and your controls. Having your entire facility go under automated situation is leaps and bounds better than doing anything hand done or relying on human error. So the automation on the BMS, you can control your irrigation, and you control that right down to an ounce of water in each plant. It also reduces the energy consumption. It reduces the amount of waste. So plants have a certain amount of runoff when you water a plant, and as soon as you can reduce that by dialing it back. And the systems that are coming out now are way better than what they were before, being able to measure what comes off the bottom of the plant, and then being able to dial that back to the beginning and say, okay, well, we use this amount of water, this is how much of waste we got, so let's dial it back until they get it perfect. And that's all on the intelligence side of the automation, and you can use that and repeat it for each room. Also, they can, just by the technology that's coming out with like the Grow IQ software, where you can adjust your humidity and your temperatures between each portion of the room. It'll keep your energy consumption a lot more consistent, rather than being all over the map when the air moves over to the temperature control or the humidity control. When you use the right choice of equipment, you can use a lot more efficient chillers and a lot more efficient dehumidification, and it'll reduce the amount of gas, the amount of electricity, reduce the amount of everything. But sometimes that comes with a bigger cost. The HVAC system definitely is a big portion of trying to keep the environment inside of the any type of grow room. So, like you said, if you use a chiller that is an energy hog, and it takes up a lot of electricity, that's obviously not the most sustainable, and it's not going to last as long. So, like we talked about using a cogen system or a gas powered chiller, that can help out with using, being a lot more sustainable and taking a lot less drain on the power grid.
So, gentlemen, I've seen this, and I'm sure you probably have too, that the choice of equipment, whether or not a producer leans more into efficient equipment up front, many times really isn't based on a sustainability roadmap. It's really rather a function of how inexpensive power is in their region. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, for sure. It definitely is. Which is why there's a lot of, when you choose the right architect or engineer, they'll, instead of using a traditional wall that you just use regular insulation in, or you use any type of sheetrock with paint on it, you use a structurally insulated panel, which helps a lot with thermodynamics and being able to keep the environment of the room a lot better, and keeping the kilowatt hours down was definitely a I don't know how to say the word. It's a big point for the customer to use.
Yeah, on that as well, like whenever we started building these things, the customer really didn't care about the amount of energy that was being used. It was a shock to them after they the equipment. Like, I remember having a conversation with an owner one day, and he came racing into my office, and he had an $80,000. It was quite a huge facility, but it was an $80,000 gas bill for a month, and he couldn't believe it. He's like, "This has to be a misprint. Should it be 8,000?" And I'm like, "No, this is unfortunately the equipment that you used." I'll use the term energy hog. Unfortunately, that's what it was. And if we did make a recommendation to value engineer as well, the units we did spec out were slightly cheaper, and they were way more efficient by maybe 15-20%. But it's the shock on their faces whenever they get the utility bills. That's whenever you're like, yeah, I just wish you'd listened to us at the start, you know?
Yeah, so it's interesting that at the intersection of sustainability and just normal business operations as usual, you're actually starting to see the value for customers when they take a more sustainable approach initially. I mean, you get a chance to see their bottom line, their bills, and their longer term operating expenses. So maybe you can share some core concepts around sustainable building in the cannabis space that you've peeled off from all that.
Well, ultimately, like to be sustainable in the space, like you have to do it right, and you have to do it once and once only. And as I said, we've already talked about this and said, like, you have to have the team that's open-minded enough to use maybe slightly more expensive equipment, maybe using the products to bring the building up to the intended use to hold the environment. You need to use the right products. Ultimately, it might cost a little more at that point in time, but the benefits are seen for years after it, where you're instead of retrofitting 2 or 3 years after that, because of per material choice in, say, the ductwork. The metal was too thin, or it wasn't designed for that use. You're changing it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if it's not insulated properly, then you have energy costs there that are just flowing through the cracks. It's a difficult conversation to have with clients, and sometimes it gets us, we don't get the job because of it. Unfortunately, once we start talking, because a lot of clients will come to us with like 60% prints, and they want us to value engineer at that point, or sustainable engineer. Look what we see, can we swap this out and that out? And unfortunately, they're only at 60% print, so they're open to 40% change orders at that point in time. And we try to explain that to them, so that they have an involved cost. That it all ties back to equipment selection, basically, and equipment selection for us in the cannabis space. So it's very hard to get, whenever you have a price tag of around, on average, $10 million to build one of these things. People don't want to spend 11; they actually want to spend 8, and they're cut corners, and they're going to use the cheaper stuff. And unfortunately, it doesn't work. As Chris says, there 2 or 3 years down the road, you're retrofitting. But the way they see it, unfortunately, is well, we've made money at this point, so we can retrofit at that point.
Yeah, so that seems like a tough way to go about it. Hoping that you're going to make enough money to fix a faulty design or faulty equipment.
Well, that's where information's the key, and that's why you need the team to be given consistent information, consistent, truthful information. Yes, we can do this cheaper, but just know 3 years, 4 years down the line, you're going to have to replace this. Whereas if everybody's on the same team, and we're all saying, like, listen, that you have sustainability here. You can go 10, 12, 15 years with this equipment, and that will take your bottom line down. You're not retrofitting. You're not having the disruption of construction within your facility. There's lots of benefits to it, but it's very hard to have that conversation whenever the price tags are pretty high in these things as to start. But we definitely do our best to try and get the client to understand that we've only got their best interests at heart. And we would really like to see them not have to change things out in 2 to 3 years' time.
Dana, there's also another aspect to build off what Eamon was talking about. Is a lot of these companies, they'll come to our team and we'll help them and walk them through the process of going to a company like National Grid or Eversource and show them how to get the rebates that you can get for the certain. Yes, the equipment might be more expensive sometimes.
Okay, so that's interesting, Chris. So you're actually helping move the client toward that and discover those opportunities.
Yes,
right?
A lot of companies won't do that, and they won't tell the client about certain things like where they're coming from. A lot of times the equipment will be spec'd out, and they don't understand that you can go to the utility company and let them know that there is a cost savings. The equipment's more expensive, but there is a cost savings, and how much energy they're using that's less. There might be an incentive that gets pushed back. You can go to the utility company, let them and ask them when their peak times are, and you can have a negotiation with them, and that can kind of mitigate your cost on the other side of it. But there's a lot that goes into equipment selection, and there's a lot that goes into trying to keep your facility sustainable, and it's all about information. And if you're trying to build your facility and you're just trying to get it as cheap as possible, you're not going to find a team like ours that'll be able to guide you and show you the proper way to do it and have your facility last for 10, 15 years rather than 2 or 3 and have to retrofit it.
Yeah, I got to tell you that just being able to help navigate the rebate opportunities within each state regarding power, that's incredibly valuable. Okay, unfortunately, we're winding down, and I don't want to turn this into an infomercial about Valiant. But let's face it, I do love talking to you guys. But you have been doing this for so long, and I've said that before, but if you could just leave us with a few parting nuggets, specifically around sustainability, future operating costs, et cetera, and really, again, the most important thing to look for in a builder so a producer isn't hit with a load of problems 2 or 3 years down the road.
That's definitely your department, Chris.
So if you're going to be choosing a builder and you're going to be starting up the cannabis facility, you have your architect, your engineer, and you have a set of plans. You want to look for the builder that will be able to fill in the gaps and be able to have your best interest in mind. These facilities will go out to bid, and most of the time people get 3 bids, and they'll always pick the cheapest one because that's what the facility can be built for. Chances are that doesn't usually work that way. Change orders are a real thing in this industry. The plans change all the time. A lot of times the facility was designed around a grower standpoint, and sometimes the grower leaves halfway through, and that facility, that can drastically change the facility, the equipment selection, the flow of the facility, and your cost can go up 20-30% very easily. You need to be able to have a construction company that'll be able to kind of guide you along the way and say, listen, we're going to build this way, or give you this option, fill in the gaps, and say this set was only 80% complete, but here's a lot of gaps that you missed, and these are the assumptions that we're making for that, and this is what your cost is actually going to be. Not this is the set at 80%, this is your cost, because you, like Eamon said before, you still have 20% of a margin of error, and a lot of people don't take up that space. They just want to hear the number. Like he said, it's a $10 million facility. Your plans say that it's going to be $8 million. They want to hear the $8 million and not the 10. Sometimes that conversation, or they call it bid leveling, that conversation needs to be had and understood from the client standpoint. And from an investor standpoint, it's a difficult pill to swallow, but it'll save you a lot more. Since we have a lot of experience in investing, you can use the example of, it's a lot easier to raise another $1 million now before you started than it is to raise your last $1 million. If you're at $9 million and you need another $1 million to fix your facility, or to finish it off, that $1 million is going to cost you sometimes 2 or 3 as much more in either equity, interest rates, or even royalties, and that can completely destroy your bottom line in your business.
Yep, that's a really good point there. So Eamon and Chris, really appreciate you guys taking time to speak with us today and sharing your thoughts on sustainable building within the cannabis industry. So in winding down, for those of you that have an interest in digging into and demystifying the aspects of a sustainable cannabis facility build, I'd really encourage you to reach out to Eamon and Chris at Valiant-America for more information, for sure. So guys, thanks again. Really appreciate the time and look forward to speaking with you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks again, listeners. Really appreciate you tuning in this week for the Sustainable Cannabis Coalition podcast. As you've just heard, we had Eamon O'Kane and Chris Canalia from Valiant-America talking about sustainability in a cannabis build-out. Please go take a look at what they're doing. I think you'll be impressed. Please keep us in mind for next week, where we've got a lot more to come. Thanks a lot. And again, I'm Dana Hillman. Talk to you soon.